Okay, guys, so we're going to wait another 2 minutes. We're going to start right at 1:05 here Eastern Time. And a couple formatting issues. So I'm going to be doing the PowerPoint here on the screen. I have a co-presenter I'll introduce in a second. And you guys are all started muted, and we're going to keep everyone muted just so there's a lot of attendees. So what we're going to ask is that throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, type them in the box here, and my colleague Nick and I will make every effort to get to all the questions. We're going to stop and read the questions, and if we happen to catch them as we're going through some slides, we will try to answer them as we go. All right, so hang tight, 2 more minutes, and then we'll be ready to roll. And great question, Nicole. We have a question here. Will the presentation be available afterwards to those that attended? So yes, anyone that attends and those that have registered and couldn't make it will be given the recording. So we're going to get that out to you afterwards. And then in addition, we're going to change it into a viewable format, put it on a help article in our help section. And then additionally, it will probably go out in our next Learn Alert as a recap, or the next Chronicle if you are signed up to receive those. Okay, guys, so we're going to get started here today. I'm looking through the attendee list. We have a lot of users that have been with us for a while, some new users that are going to just be diving into CR and learn. So thank you for joining. This presentation is for newer users, for active users that just kind of want to recap, and then we're going to be giving you some tips of the trade, right? So tips and tricks of how to use different things in the software. So a lot of people can benefit from this webinar. It's titled Ins and Outs of Using Our Different Data Collection Methods in Your Learning Trees and Your Sessions. Okay, so my name is Greg. I'm the VP of Clinical Product Development here. I usually lead these webinars, sometimes with another colleague, sometimes by myself, and today I'm lucky enough to have another colleague of mine, Nick Schreiber. Nick, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, we've got a lot of really neat stuff planned for you, especially the sneak peek of the brand new learning tree. So there'll be a lot of really neat stuff to see.
Perfect. So Nick is one of our wonderful implementation coordinators here at CR. He's walked a lot of you through your training, so glad to have him on here today. We're going to be going back and forth a little bit today. So I always start out, just for the newer user, just 1 minute. I usually start out about what is Learn. So for the new users out here, this is helpful. For the older users, just zone out for a minute. But basically, it's our clinical platform. It's our toolkit. We have the Learn module, and our main primary use of that, the structure of Learn is all based around a program book, our clinical learning trees, where users are able to write goals, pull goals in from their library, reuse goals, edit goals, check out the graphs from those goals. They're able to throw any of those targets, those stimuli, those goals onto our data sheets. So in our system, we have offline, online, and group data sheets. Those are called our sessions. We have an older version, and we have our newer version, beta, which a lot of our users have really explored and are loving over the last 2 or 3 months. So those are our sessions. And then we have a lot of data analysis tools, our goal list, our goal dashboard, a lot of different graphing features. More to come. You might get a little preview at the end. A lot of our users are using it for an electronic learning system now as well, where you can create courses for staff management. So create competencies, assign them to staff, or create courses such as policy manuals and assign those to staff as well. You can store assessments in the system, use those assessments in your progress reports. And of course, again, progress reports, daily session notes, supervision notes, and more. So those are our reporting tools that we have. So all of that comprises what Learn is. Okay, so moving in to today's objectives, here's what we're going to go over today. Again, it's a mix of an overview, tips, tricks, and explanations about our data collection methods, what to pick and what it looks like, right? So we are going to go over data tracking methodologies, the views, the visual displays of those. We're going to go over automatic data collection in the field. A lot of you already know how to do this. We're not focused on actually how to use our data sheets. We're going over the tips and the tricks, how to use rate, how to use interval, some of those things. We're going to then go into how to enter, based on the data type, enter your archival data, your manual data entry. We're going to go into that. And for that, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of our revamped learning trees. Same learning trees, just revamped. Okay, same terminology, same buttons, just a little bit of a different look, and we're going to practice by showing you how to enter data into those revamped learning trees. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to let Nick take the first half here. He's going to walk you through a little bit about the branch types and how to pick the right type of data collection method. Nick, you ready to take over here?
Yeah, ready to roll. So one of the things that I work with my groups that I've implemented is kind of showing them how what kind of a tiering system works most optimally in CentralReach. And what we've got first, we've got our manual data collection. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you see the targets. So the targets are the things where we're saying, I want percent independent or percent correct or score or frequency. So as many of you guys are aware, unless you're very, very, very new, that's those yes, yes settings where, hey, I want that cumulative data collection. And I also want that direct manual data collection. So all that bottom tier does is say, I want to be able to track this. Now, if you look right above those, you'll see that long-term and those short-term goals. So those are both our cumulative repository for mastered programs. So when you look at those branches, there isn't any direct data collection associated with those. It's just show me everything that's mastered below it. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, I've got an exemplar up there of tacting. So labeling of a bunch of different kinds of animals. So I've got hippo, I've got monkey, and I've got corgi. So because I had mastered out all of those, it'll tell me on the program level, which is animals, that, hey, everything that falls below this is mastered. But if I was teaching a bunch of different categories of labels, so if I was teaching to label community helpers or with all of those respective targets that fall below it, I would be able to see on that very, very top tier, that tacting tier, that, hey, I've mastered out 40 things across all of these different programs. So those are those things that will pull into the reports, where you're able to pull in, their long-term, the mastered things on the domain level, the short term, all of the mastered things on whatever targets fall below it, and then of course those really standard graphs on the very, very bottom on that target level. And of course on the very, very bottom you'll see those three little blue icons. So that's just the exemplar to know, oh, that's a cumulative branch versus I'm taking direct data collection. So I will open up the little questions box. Does anyone have any questions about this tiering model? Give you guys a second. So I guess part two to this is we have a lot of groups that will say, you know what, for behavior reduction, maybe I don't want a program level. Maybe I don't want a second tier. We're the very top tier. So Greg, can you scroll over tacting? So maybe on that very, very over tacting, yep, right there. So maybe I want to call that one behavior reduction, but I just want to throw my targets underneath there too. Completely possible to do it that way. You just say, hey, I want one cumulative branch, and then I want my behavior reduction as a target underneath it. So you can totally do that. You just have to make sure that in your note and form that everything is all set up to be able to pull from those particular tiers. So the thing you're taking direct data collection on would be on that short-term level, on that second tier. Yep, right there. So I didn't see any questions, but if anybody, okay, I'm seeing one. Okay. So I think we're ready for the next slide, Greg. And if anyone has any questions about those previous ones, we can definitely come back and see those. So where do we start? So we've started. So we've begun creating our learning tree, and we've got our targets, right? So how do we actually select which data collection method we want? Well, when we click on the individual target, so those yes settings branch, you'll default to that View tab. So you can see that right on the top of the screen where it says View, Graph, Goal, Comments, Edit. Well, the Edit one is the area where you'll decide what data collection method you want. And I have that opened up right there on the bottom. So all of the data collection methods that we have. So there's that %correct, %independent, duration, task analysis, and so on and so forth. And we'll go through each and every one of those and just give you a little bit of information on how it display, or how the visual display will look, what it will look like in the data collection piece, and what are the pros and cons of using each. So do you have any more to add about that, Greg, before we move on to the data collection methods?
No, all good. Move along.
Okay, cool. So I'm ready for the next slide. So let's start with %correct. So everything on this page, the y-axis is going to default to 0 to 100%. So if we start with %correct, we're just looking at how many of the trials did they get correct. So the options that you're given in session is they either got it right or they got it wrong. Now, you can do prompts also, but just in this kind of example, keep it really, really simple. So either it's a plus or a minus. They did it or they didn't. And the way that that's calculated on the graph is the number of correct trials they had over the total number of trials that you took data on. So if you had 10 trials and they got all 10 with pluses, 100%. But if you set it up to take 15 trials and you only took data on 10 of them, it's not going to calculate based on those ones that you didn't take data on at all. So will you be showing us how the graphs look based on the data collection method? Oh, that's actually what we're kind of going over right now, is all the ones here, the y-axis is going to start at the 0 and then go up to 100. Now when we get to things like rate, that's a little more complicated, and I do have a slide based on that one to show you how the visual displays will look for that one and the adjustments that you can make. Oh, thanks. The default on my graph is at 150, not 100. Oh, so if the default on the graph is 150, it may depend on which data collection method you're using. We do have the defaults set for all of these at 0 to 100, which you can change later and give you the ability to truncate if you want, so cut off a chunk of the graph. But if your graph does say 150 to 100, you would have to look in the, can you go back to the last slide, Greg? Cool. So you would come to that edit screen, and that's where you would change it based on those graph values. So any of the ones that were on that previous screen, or on the next screen rather, it will default to the 0 to 100. But if you do the override, that is why those graphs would look that particular way. I think we're ready for the next one, Greg. Cool. So %independent. This is one of my favorite data collection methods that we've got. I feel like it's very, very robust, especially for things like manding, so requesting items. You get 3 response modalities. So did the learner independently do the task that you got? Did they make an error? Or was there no response at all? So I had set up the situation where there could have been an opportunity for them to respond and they didn't respond at all, or they made a mistake. So if it was a requesting item, like let's say requesting chicken nuggets, learner says chicken nuggets to me, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, completely independent, versus a learner that goes or points at it, like, oh, that was an error, we're teaching functional communication here. Or I'm like, do you want this? And nothing at all, when we know that there is some state of deprivation for that. So now the way that this is calculated for %independent, and again, if any of you have any questions related to these, we will spend a little bit of time. If you shoot me some potential programs and ways that you can track that, I can kind of go through those. and just kind of work with you to find what may work best. So the way that percent independent is calculated is the total number of times that you choose independent over the total amount that you choose something. So if I have 10 trials and 3 were independent and 7 were error or no response, well, that's going to give me 30% on there because there were only 3 that were listed as independent and the rest were coded as errors. Now, there's a part 2 to that. And you'll see right down there the count prompts as negative option. If you do have prompting and criterion tied to a percent independent, now you can decide, okay, I'm using a full verbal, a partial verbal. Do I want those prompts to, which is the default is to have those prompts counted as a correct trial, or do I want to override that and say, I used a full verbal for this, I want that to count as a failed trial. So that's that first time you see count prompts as negative. Now, when we move down to task analysis, you have the option to choose, am I doing a forward chain, backward chain, or whole chain? You have the option to say, hey, this step was correct, or it wasn't. And the way that that is calculated, it's the number of steps that you have coded as a correct over the total amount of steps that you take data on. So if you have something like a task analysis like washing hands, and you're only running 5 trials, or if you're only running 5 of the 10 steps, well, if you're only running 5 of the 10 steps, that's going to be displayed as 100. So if you have 10 steps in the task analysis, you would say after the first 5, failed, 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 because they ended up getting 50% of the entire steps in the task analysis correct. So it will only consider steps that you have actually taken data on. Now, for those of you that are using sessions, you'll notice that task analysis, once you run it once, first step turns to green, second step turns to green, third step turns to green. Well, it's like, okay, I ran this one time. What do I do? Can I run it again? Well, that's where you'll look at your sidebar, and Greg will be able to show you this when we go to sessions, and you can manually graph it. So the 2 ways to graph it, as you guys know, is manually graph it on the right-hand side or graph all at the end. But for things that you want to run a few times, particularly a task analysis, if you were practicing washing hands a few times in session, you can manually graph it on the right-hand side, and then you'll be able to run that program again because it will clear that data sheet because it hits to the graph right away. Do we have any questions related to task analysis? So there's one new cool thing that I had seen with task analysis that I thought was really neat. A group was asking me, how do you do sequencing in CentralReach? I'm like, oh, sequencing is really cool, right? A program that we all will work on at some point. So if I want to do sequencing, I want to know how a learner is doing on every single step. So if I have the steps to making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, so I've got my 4 cards and I want them to put them in order. A task analysis data collection method is a really neat way to do that. Because if I have 4 steps, so get out the ingredients, open up the, or get in the ingredients, spread the peanut butter, put the top back on, and then cut the sandwich. If I have 4 steps, I want to know how the learner is doing. Did they get the very first card in the right position? Did they get the second card in the right position? How about the third and the fourth? Because that gives me a lot of information if I know, wow, of my 4 cards, the learner is consistently getting the second and third steps right, but not the first and the fourth. So it's kind of a unique way to do the task analysis, because when you look at the raw data, you can see exactly which step the learner is erroring at, and you'll be able to adjust that too. So I'm like, okay, looks like I need to do some discrimination training between the first step and the fourth step. So just something kind of neat, a different way to use task analysis for things like that require a particular order that you want to track all of those. The very next one on there, the time sampling. So in the Edit tab, you'll adjust the interval length. So how long do or what's the total duration of time before I want my little beeper to go off? So if I'm doing some form of time sampling and I set my interval at 5 minutes, every 5 minutes your timer will ding. And that gives you the ability, depending on what type of time sampling you're doing. So if it was partial interval, hey, the timer dinged, did this happen at all, plus or minus? Or if I'm doing whole interval, was there any break in this at all, or was the behavior continuous? So the way that this is calculated is it says the number of intervals that have a plus over the total amount of intervals that you've run. So that's why it's a y-axis of 0 to 100, because if there were 5 intervals and the behavior happened in all 5, well, it happened in 100% of all intervals. So I don't see any more questions, but that's all I've got for the y-axis of 0 to 100 graphs. Cool. So the next one. The data collection, these are a little bit different. This is where your y-axis will adjust based on the spread of your data. So if I had data points at 0 to 20, my graph is going to be displayed as 0 to 20. Now you can set those overrides for the graph values, but we suggest just kind of leaving those blank because this will automatically adjust for you. I've had those instances in support where someone will say, Nick, I lost my data, where did it go? Well, I'm like, oh, I look at the graph values, you're doing something with percent correct, and you have it set at 0 to 20. So if you can't see everything on the graph, the first place to look is right at those graph value overrides. So the very first one, score. So score will give you a keypad. So if you have something that is occurring a lot, so a very, very high frequency, in an example I like is for aggression. If I want to know how many aggressive episodes or how many aggressive instances there were in a session, and it's happening 60 times once and then 30 times again, I can type that in with a keypad. And then at the very end, it's going to give me the total number that I've got. So with score, I've seen it before with something like aggression, where if you want to track an aggressive episode or the total number of aggressive instances, an aggressive episode would say, hey, 60 instances, hit that graph button. The data point will say 60. If there were another 30, hit that 30, graph button, and then it'll do that, as opposed to just adding things in and having that total aggregated number. The very next one is frequency. So with the frequency, I'm given either a plus or a minus, so there's no time component at all. So with the minus, the only thing the minus really does is reduces the total. So if I'm tracking a behavior, it's plus, 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 plus. I'm like, oh, I made a mistake. And then I hit that minus, because we're just looking at the total number. Now, kind of comparing score and frequency, because that's a question that I get a lot. Frequency will, now with the brand new beta sessions, frequency can do the same thing as score. It effectively is the same thing. It's just giving you the total number that you've got. But in the beta sessions, on the frequency branch, when you're taking data on it, you can highlight that 0. So if there's 0 instances, you can highlight that and type in the number. So I just suggest to my groups, like, I just suggest using frequency. I think that it's really, really fast to just highlight the number and change it. So very, very, very similar data collection methods. It's just if you want something with a keypad, then we've got score. Next one we got is duration. So with duration, you're given the option to start or stop. So you're given the option to start or stop. So very similar to to what we were talking about with score. If I want to know the total duration of an episode, I will start the timer when the episode starts. I will end the timer when the episode stops, and then I can hit graph. Because then on my visual display, I'm going to see, oh, that first instance of aggression was 5 minutes long. The second one was 3 minutes long. But if you're not concerned about the duration of episodes, you could just say, I want to know the total amount of time. So for something like elopement, I just want to know the total amount of time that my learner is away from the table. and that's where I could use that option of just start it whenever it's happening, stop it whenever it's happening, and start the timer again. Very, very last one, rating scales. So when I think rating scales, I think magnitude. Now, you could use rating scales for a lot of things. I saw one group use things such as, how is their affect in session? You know, a 0, you know, there wasn't any really fantastic session, versus 5. For those of you that use my incredible 5-point scale, you would be able to say, oh, you know, how are they doing? Is it a 0? Is it 5? I will go back to, I had just received a few questions, so I'll go back and address those too. But with the rating scale, it'll code it as a 0 to 5, or if you want to track magnitude, 0, very, very low magnitude, or 5, very, very, very high. And the y-axis on that one will be 0 to 5. So the first question I've got is, will SCORE work in offline mode by totaling the frequency of each episode? So offline mode, a little bit different. So offline mode will only allow you to take one data point. So if you were doing that, you would need to manually change the number. Because with SCORE, I mean, with the online sessions, you have the ability to just have it hit the graph immediately, but if you are using offline mode, it will not. In that case, I would probably suggest using frequency for those goals. How can I get both graphs? We'll come to that one. So I got a question about how can I get both graphs, and I believe that the question that was getting asked there was how can I combine graphs, and we'll be able to address that a little bit later. Let's see, both episode and total duration. Okay, got it. So what I've had some groups do is if you want to track two separate things, so if I have an aggressive response, I would use something, oh, well, you can't see my cursor, but it would be over frequency. So you create two goals that look identical, and a frequency and duration. And I could say frequency of hitting, or a frequency of screaming and duration of screaming. And you can track both of those. My suggestion would be to put them both in pinned view, right at the bottom of the screen next to each other. So the moment you have an instance of one of those aberrant behaviors, you can track it, and you can also very, very quickly start taking the duration on that. I'm tracking number.
And Nick, I don't mind, I can type the answers to the questions as you can proceed.
Okay. I've got one more. If you could just do the third from the bottom. You're asking, I had one person ask, can you change the scale from 0 to 7? Unfortunately, we currently have it listed as 0 to 5. And then, Greg, can you get the last question for me? And then we'll go to the next slide.
Sure. Let's do this.
Oh, actually, I'll address that one too. So the person was asking about graphing a 0 frequency. So if there were 0 instances of a behavior, that's very, very different than not running the program. So in session, when you hit the graph button, you will see three things. You will see targets with data collection, targets with no data collection, and then also targets that cannot be graphed yet. So if you have something that's listed as frequency and it's listed as 0, if you want it still listed as 0, you'll use that little checkbox at the bottom to say graph this as 0. Now you'll see that for both frequency and duration. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but you may also see that with SCORE.
Sorry, I missed the question there. Is it how to graph a 0 of SCORE and how to graph a 0 of rating scale?
Now, does 0 give you the option right there to graph as 0 right on the bottom of the screen in the graphing options right at the end?
It does. I know that yeah. So yep. So when I start my half here, we're going to go over into the session. We're going to look at everything, and we'll tackle these zeros for graphing as well. I'll show you the visual on that.
Okay, cool. So there are two questions that I just need to keep going in there, but Greg will address those while I do this. So rate. Rate is kind of a little more difficult one to conceptualize. So I put two views of the same exact data set. So with rate, it's effectively looking at frequency over time. So how often is this happening? You know, using a minute interval. So CR calculates everything in minute by default. So the moment you start your timer in your session, and if you hit click, between the time you start it and stop it on that rate timer, it's going to give us information in the raw data of this is how many times that is occurring per minute. So right here on the screen, you'll see two data sets. I put in the first data set as 1 per minute, or in the first graph, it's 1 per minute, 2 per minute, and 3 per minute. Now you'll notice the visual display is identical, so that's how rate works. However, there's an option in the Edit tab, and it says Graphed Interval Display. And what that does is it changes the axes. So if I want to know what is my rate across minutes, it's going to be that first option. The next one will be hours. So it'll multiply it, but it'll still be the same thing, because 1 per minute is the same as 60 per hour. So if any of you have ever seen, Nick, I set it at whole day, and my one data point is at 1440. What's going on? It's because the system will extrapolate based on whatever graphed interval display you choose. So 1 per minute is the same as 60 per hour versus the, I believe, 1440 per day. But our learners sleep, I would assume. So the hour or the full day may not be the best measure, because it will multiply across it all. So I'm ready for the next one, Greg. Cool. So task analysis. The task analysis, we had talked kind of a little bit about that one before, how I think it's really cool to use sequencing. But if you choose that data type, you'll hit the plus button after you type in your first task. You'll put them all in order. So you'll say plus, the very first step I had was hold the Kleenex, with the next step being hold the Kleenex and blow. And this one also has a count prompts as negative option. And what that means is if I'm doing a gestural prompt and I want that to be counted as a failed trial, I can absolutely have that option, because it will currently default that if a prompt is used using the prompting and criterion, that it will count it as a correct. So if you want prompts to count as negative, you'll go on that edit screen and you'll scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll be able to check that box. So that's all I've got for that one, Greg. Cool. I do have one more question, and it says, what do you click to see in hours for rate? I may have to address that one a little bit later. If you see hours, like let's say you have a 1 minute data point, what you would see in hours is it would multiply that data point times 60. So if you have a 3-hour session and it occurs 3 times and you have it per hour in that setting, you're going to see a 1, because it's going to divide in that case rather than multiply. So you're going to see what the rate would be had it occurred across that entire interval. So 1 minute timing, it's going to multiply it times 60 versus a 3-hour timing. If it's with the hour display, it's going to divide by 3. So that's what you'll see if you have a 3-hour session in hours. It'll divide whatever that is by 3. Cool. That's all I've got.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, Nick. Very informative, very thorough in the explanation of each of the data collection methods. And I especially liked how you kind of, the framework was based around which methods were the 0 to 100 on the axis and which were variable. So nice work there. And, what I'm going to jump into, I'm going to jump into CR here, okay? And I'm going to show you each of those methods that Nick showed and described. I'm going to show you an example of how it looks. I'm going to go into a special view called the eyeball view, go into a little bit of how to view and where the min-max comes from, the quick out of entry, and some other tips as well. So let me just change my screen for a sec. I'm going to go over to the session here, and so I am in the beta session. Okay, so a few things that we're going to go over. The main thing that users have to remember is obviously to start their timer. Okay. The second thing that the user has to remember is the rate, the interval, and the duration do not start upon starting the main timer. Okay, whether we like that or not, it's a very important thing to remember. Okay, so I have my main timer, and then we need to start our interval and our rate timers. Most users are not going to want to start the duration, right? Because a duration of something, some behavior has not started. So I have on the bottom here the duration of timer. I'm going to leave that off. If I want to have my partial interval recording going throughout the session, I'm going to start that timer. Okay, that timer is good to go, and it will beep at me throughout the session. Okay, mine is set at 2 minutes, so even if I have this down or I have it up, it's going to beep at me, and if you're on a tablet, the tablet will shake or vibrate and notify you that you have to score the occurrence or non-occurrence of that behavior. Okay, I'm going to simply pause it right now so it doesn't beep at us the next 15 minutes. I am also going to show you starting the rate timer. Okay, and I want to give you a very important tip. The rate timer is running. Again, if I shut the pinned view and I open the pinned view, it's still running. However, if I go play outside with the client, if I pause my timer to watch a movie, whatever, I pause and notice the rate timer pauses. Okay? So if this is down and I come back 5 minutes later and I remember to unpause, start my timer, I'm good to go up here, but a common error we find is that the users do not re-click their rate timers. Okay, so just something to think about as you plan ahead. We do have a future case, a future request from users to restart those if the user selects a certain button. So that is going to happen down the line. But right now, make sure to restart your rate timers. Okay, now going a little deeper. I'm in the middle here, and I want to just show you an example of what Nick went over. This is the % correct data collection. It starts with a plus and a minus. Plus, minus, plus, minus. That's the % correct. You can also have % correct with prompting. Okay? You can always have those prompts. These are what the user puts in. Now, something that gets confusing for users is that you have to double click in the % correct data type. If it's just correct, you can click the check. If it's just incorrect, click the minus. However, if you add prompts into it, you're able to have a lot of flexibility and a lot of visibility of your prompting. So if the child responds correctly at that prompt at the upper elbow, that's great. Put a plus there. That does not score in terms of the final percentage. So the user is going to have to say, what am I scoring that as, right? Yes, they got it correct at that prompt level, but am I counting prompts as negative for this program, or am I counting prompts as positive? All right, another example, they got it wrong here, right? So I'm counting that as wrong. A third example, I tried this, didn't work, tried this, it didn't work, tried this, it didn't work, and tried this. It worked. Cool, it worked. Am I counting that as correct, or am I counting that as incorrect? I'm going to count it as incorrect. Okay, so just a little ins and outs of how to use that. We don't tell the users how to use it, we just want you to know how. Okay, here's that clicker Nick was talking about. Very simple stuff. Easy access, right? So let's pretend that you have some problem behavior. You pop it open, click that frequency per session, click, click, click. Now you're blocking, now you're redirecting, right? Now you're actually just working on that problem behavior, really not clicking and clicking and clicking. An easy thing to do, come in here, type in 8, okay? And then start right where you left off, okay? Come back here, type 20, start right where you left off. So just a little trick there for you, okay? Let me show you a few more. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to get to that % independent. So Nick went over this. I have previously set up if my prompts count as positive or count as negative. Like Nick went over, this is just the visual right here. Independent is going to be positive, error is going to be negative, no response, negative, independent, positive, and gesture. Honestly, forget how I set this up. So if I click it, I set it up as negative. How do I know that? because that percentage went down. Okay? Another little quick look into a little deeper into this percent independent. We're going to dive into that eyeball view. I'm going to click it open, and this is a really nice view for trial by trial data, either 5 as I have right here, or 10, or even unlimited. You get a nice view of what you have just done. So that's the first way that it's very important, right? It's a nice, easy way to see what you've done, and it's also a very easy way to change your response, right? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to click that. Okay? Nice and easy. You can put it away, and you can open it up. Another thing that you can do is double click, and now you see the score decreases, you see the green box go away, and now if you were to graph right now, you would be basing it off 4 trials instead of 5. Okay, let me put that away. I'm going to move down to a task analysis. A task analysis is very easy to use in the system. You can either use it like this and go trial by trial, pick up article of clothing, yes, lay out on bed or table, fold in half. Okay, so very easy to use. Or again, that eyeball. If I use the eyeball, pop it open, and I love this view for task analyses right here. Lays them out very clear, and I know what steps are next. The other thing to notice about task analysis, this is a total task. How do I know? One, I've put it in the title. Very important to put in the title so your folks do not have to go searching for the directions. For those of you that don't know, my directions are right here, my instructional notes, my SD, my correct response, and so forth. However, I don't want to stop just to see what method I am. The other way to know is that these are all bolded, right? The total task, you're doing the whole thing. Those steps are all bolded. If you have selected in the Edit tab of the Task Analysis feature, in the Data branch, if you've selected forward or backward, the step that you're currently on will be highlighted. If you have set up a criterion to bounce from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 in a forward chain, and you're starting on step 1, that will be highlighted and nothing else will be bolded. If you're backwards and you're on step 5 will be bolded. Okay, so just a little trick there of how you might know. Moving along, and I'll look at some questions in a minute, and Nick, if you have a sec, you can type some responses there. Right here I have my rating scale. So a lot of you asked, can you make it till 7? Can you make it to 3? So it is set at 5. Okay, so it is set at 5. It starts at 0, and I'm going to scroll. I can either click, or scroll. For those of you that want a 0 to 10 or a 0 to 7 or a 0 to 3, I would either try to still use this and kind of space out the numbers and define, right? So I can define what my score is, or use a score pad, okay? Either the score or the rating scale would work. Some people find the rating scale to be a little easier, okay? So one more thing I want to teach you. So a timer, right? My duration of tantrum. So I've started that right now. But again, the quick entry, I can come in here, and if I forgot to start the timer on time, I can always do that. So again, with frequency and duration, you can quickly enter the numerics right there. All right, let me try to find one more example for you. The score pad. The score pad Nick discussed. You can either simply type a number or open up the number pad and see a little number pad, right? They got 25, well, 725, right? Right, they got whatever you want. You can kind of click around and change around the answers, okay? So that is an example of the score keypad. So we've seen percent correct, percent independent, and rating scale and score, duration, and frequency, okay? We've gone over the TAs. We've gone over the eyeball view of the trials, okay? One more example of the eyeball view. If I have a maximum, it lays it out very nicely for me, okay? So nice to use the eyeball view, all right? Now, a little bit on the min, the max, all right? So I have a max of 5. I have no max. Okay? I also have some that are a minimum. The only way to know it's a minimum is to look to the right. To look to the right. You must score a minimum of 5 trials. That's not very noticeable. So what we do recommend is coming in here and putting something noticeable for the user. How do I do that in the moment? I can click this little pencil icon up top, and I can actually change it to this. Clap hands, 1-step directions, min 5 trials. Update branch name, look at that. So now it's noticeable. Okay? Now what happens with the minimums, I like to demonstrate. Soon as I click that trial 5, bam, that graph target is available. That is what the minimum is. Okay? This graph target will not be available until I do that. How do I set up the minimum? Another little trick. I always see users trying to go back to the book a different way. You can always quickly go back to the branch by clicking this little icon right here, the square with the arrow, pop it open, and you're going to land right on this specific branch. Notice it has my new title, and I can go to the Edit tab and notice that that is where the minimum trials comes from. Okay, so minimum and maximum. The other examples that I was going over, right? No max on Apple, a max of 5 on Mom. That is because of the max that I've put, again, on this Edit tab. All right, so that's a little review of the min and the max and how to format that. And then moving right along, I want to show you one more little trick about how to quickly enter out of data. Out of data. So Mom is a good one. If I want to quickly enter 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5, I just pop it open. There's my eyeball view. And then many of you might not know that there's another view. Pop it open, the number correct. Click it. Instead of doing these little buttons, click here, click, click, or just simply type 3 out of 5, graph, and now it's graphed. Okay, very quick little out of. Okay, little out of button. All right, I'm going to stop for a sec while we show my PowerPoint, and then I'm going to look at some questions. Nick, were you able to answer any questions, or should I jump in?
I was able to get to all of them, I think. Can you go back to a raw data, or at least speak a little bit to the no data taken?
No data
So returning
taken. Sure. Yeah, let me do that. So no data taken. Let me jump back over there. What will happen is, if I'm right here, this is a good example. Some users, Nick's absolutely right, so there's a no value that will pop up on your raw data in your learning tree. Some people say, how did I get that, right? There's a couple reasons. If I'm doing some trials, okay, let me jump to a bunch of them. I have my 10 trials of data. I pop it open. All these trials have data, but I've bounced to trial 11. So trial 11 in our system, it's not going to calculate out of 11. Do not worry, but sometimes you're going to see no value if you look in the raw data for this as trial 11, no value. The other reason you might get a no value is if you take it away, right? Trial 9 would say no value. Trial 4 would say no value. That's just going to happen sometimes if you have in and out internet maybe and you double, triple click and it didn't catch it, or if you click really, really fast, normally in perfect internet, or again, if you take away things like this, okay? But again, right here, I have data on 7 trials, so it might say no value in my raw data for these, but it's calculating correct out of total out of 7 trials. Another way that's good for no data is something like a TA, right? Maybe I'm not working on certain skills, right? Whatever the reason. I'm only doing, three steps. Or that one's not applicable, right? So that's that NA that we all use on our task analysis sheets, right? So there's always that last step, like, you know, fold it and hand it to mom or something. And mom's not there, so that's an NA, right? Something like that. That would say no value. That's our version of an NA. Okay, but don't worry, if I scored this right now, it would score out of the 5 steps and not the 6 steps. Okay. All right, got to move along. We have about 8 minutes. Wow, okay, so let me jump right in. We definitely lied about taking 50, so sorry about that. All right, running skills more than once. I'm going to go into that real quick. Behavior data, instances versus total, when and how to graph your zeros, and we're actually probably going to skip the maintenance schedules because that's a little more of a complex training here, okay, because I want to show you how to enter it in the new tree. All right, so real quick, running skills more than once. The ones that are going to be most important to run more than once, TA. So what you're going to do, and if you're on a tablet, this is probably going to be shut. Open it up, graph that target. Okay, another one, the score pad. Open it up, graph that target. TAs, score pads, and then rating scales are going to need to be graphed before you run them again. Okay, I've graphed it, but I want to do it again later in the day. I graph it. Okay, so that's a very easy topic, but just know that you can graph certain ones and move right along. The other ones you're going to want to graph are instances of tantrums, or rather maybe episodes of tantrums. This one's 56. I want to graph it, right? So then later, 20 minutes later, another tantrum begins. This one's, for the sake of time, 5 seconds. This one's 5 seconds. I want to graph it, okay? Things such as frequency per session. I don't want to graph that, right? I want to keep this going until the end, right? I want to keep my rate going until the end. I'm probably, well, maybe want to leave my intervals. Some users want just a sample of 1 hour. They're going to probably want to stop it, graph it after the hour. Some want a 30-minute sample. You're going to graph it, right? But frequency, leave till the end. Duration, graph the instances. The good thing about tantrum is on the main graph, and this is out of the scope of this presentation, but if you have 4 tantrums that day, let's make it easy, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Total of 20. You're going to see a few things. You're going to get to see on the graph each instance and the length, right? So you're going to see 4 data points and the length. Good to go there. You're going to be able to scroll under the graph, click the total daily. The total daily will be 20. So you're getting both things, individual instances, the lengths, the total duration of the day, and you're going to see the data entry history under the graph that gives you all the data. So it'll kind of give you, it could give you an average as well. So you're going to get a lot of things. I recommend graphing each duration of tantrum. Okay. Let's see how to graph, right? So we just talked about graphing individually. Now how to graph everything, right? I have some trials here. I have some trials here. I'm going to graph. It's the end of my day. I'm going to simply come over here, graph all, pop it up. Just want to give an explanation of this. Anything that has data currently will be graphed, right? My clap hands, my hitting, okay? It's going to also list out targets that cannot be graphed, okay? I never started that partial interval. I never did that TA. Ooh, question. I have done that TA, right? So why is it saying it? It already has saved that data. You've already graphed that data for the TA. So it's just telling you that currently on the data sheet, there's a 0 out of 6. It can't be done, right? So don't worry about anything you've already graphed. Those might be in this middle section, okay? And then down here, a few questions were about this, the zeros, right? Pants up or down. That's currently at a 0, right? That's a rating scale. Rating scales and score and frequency and duration will count as zeros if they're sitting there at 0, but you can graph them, okay? This case, I've already graphed my tantrums. I don't have to worry about it. I actually already graphed this one, and I actually already graphed this one. But in another situation, you might actually want that 0. Maybe they really did get that 0 on that skill, and I'm going to include it with the ones above. Okay, so if you have no behaviors for a day, and there's zeros down here for kicking and SIB and elopement, you're going to want to graph them. That's how to graph your zeros. And it graphed, and if you see that notice on your screen, I'll hint at maintenance. It said one of the branches on my screen has disappeared because I did it and it was in maintenance. So I had a maintenance schedule going on, and that maintenance schedule triggered that to fall off the data sheet. Okay, so that is the graphing. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek real quick on the learning tree entry. Okay, so give me 1 sec and I will pull up a new window, and you guys that have some time, okay, so give me 1 sec while I pull this over. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, and if those of you that have 5 more minutes, I will not be offended if a bunch of you hop off, but I'm going to give you the intro to the revamped learning tree. 5 minutes, I promise. Manual data tree, data entry, and tree revamp. Okay, so let me just go over these things with you real quick. Let me pull it over, and we're going to be good to go. Give me a sec here. All right, so we're going to go over the new sidebar data entry. We're going to go over entering data into the correct phase, a quick add, and a quick scroll through the tree. All right, here I go. The learning tree has been revamped. It's going live in about 3 weeks, okay? 3 weeks for you guys. You guys are getting the sneak peek. We're not showing you the whole thing. There will be a future webinar for that, but you're going to see a few great features of the learning tree. Let me pull one up for you. This is not live yet, okay? It's not live. So, a couple things you're going to notice. There's some cool metrics right on the front. In Jane's book, we've met some goals since the start. 10% have been mastered. 74 are in progress. The last one mastered. The most recent comments. So we have a lot of cool little metrics, okay? But let me dive deeper into how to enter data, okay? If I go over here, my book looks pretty similar. I'm going to go over here, frequency, and I'm going to have a graph. Notice, no more little view tab right when you click the graph. You're going to be able to just scroll through your graphs very quickly. So watch this. Graph, next one, graph, check it out. Next one, graph, check it out. Next one, graph, check it out. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to show you. Very easy to scroll through your book and scroll through your branches. Okay, how do I add data? We're going to be working off a side view. Okay, don't get scared. We have the description, the comments, the edit, add a branch, add data, data history, and goal. The same buttons, right, just in a different place. How do I add data? I'm going to add data with the little plus sign. What do I want to add? I'm going to add some data. This is a really cool prompt. We've had a lot of feedback that people get confused about what phase it's clicked to. So it's telling you, okay, I'm in intervention. You can still override it. I could add some generalization data, but it's going to yell at me, right? It's, hey, you're currently in intervention. Are you sure? Oh, actually, I made a mistake. I'm going back. All right, now I'm in intervention again, okay? So that's pretty cool there. How do we enter data? Obviously the same, right? You click and you save, all right? Now it's saved. That's how easy it is to enter data. All right, one more for you. Rate. Click my rate. Add my data. Pop it open. I'm going to enter 3. Very important, as Nick described, always do hours. The time was in, or sorry. Always do minutes, right? 3 in 60 minutes, okay? Save data point. Okay, the feature's the same as before, all right? It's going to just be very easy to pop open things from your side, Okay, so that is how to enter data in the new system. How to view my data? I go to data history, and I still have it. Okay, I still have it right here. All right, easy peasy. Okay, a quick add skill. So let me show you a new feature right here. I'm going to go to one that has a good example. So letters, right? This is just an example I have that I can quickly add data using the new out of. Remember I showed you that out of in the data sheet, but I'm going to pop it open. It's telling me that it's currently in maintenance. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to use the out of feature, right? Even though I don't have a max set, I can still do it. I got 13 out of 26 letters, right? Let's pretend. There we go. So a quick add for those of you that take notes on paper and have to come in here and add data. So a nice little quick add. All right. So what I wanted to show you was the new sidebar entry. Okay. How to add data, how to use the quick percentage add, how to add data into the correct phase in that prompt that stops you from entering it into the incorrect. Okay. So get ready for this. In a few more weeks, there's a ton of new features, right? If I want to add this to my data sheet, boom, one button right there. Okay. If I want to do some other cool things that I'm not going to tell you about today, there's some other stuff coming. Look out for a webinar on this learning tree revamp, and you'll get a lot of notice and a lot of articles about it. Okay. So questions before we finish up.
Are we ready to show my favorite part, Greg, or is that for later?
We can show your favorite part. Where do you want me to click?
The add a branch.
Oh, that's right. That's right. One more little feature there. So I'm right here.
Greg says it's little. This is probably my new favorite part of the system. It's yes, no settings going away. Very, very, very fast to add brand new branches. You choose, do you want, oh, sorry, Greg, I'll let you go for it.
Oh, no, you're fine. So yeah, you want to walk him through this?
Yeah, so now you don't have to mess around with yes, no settings anymore. Building out books, very, very quick. It says, hey, I want my cumulative branch, so either I want my domain or my short-term goal, and then, you know, I could just decide what do I want to name it, and then throw in my data collection tier under that. So it's much, much, much faster to build out books or library templates.
Yep, very fast. So cumulative branch, data, and if you make a mistake, right, right, you can click back. Before you had to go through some different hoops to do that. Your library is right here. Okay, we did tweak the way that you can click around. We made it more easy to click around different skills as well. So that'll be coming out as an article. Very easy to get your videos in there as well. Okay, so the big take-home point, things are quicker, easier. And one last thing before I let you all off, when you bulk copy things and you need to change the name, double click, change it, target name here, enter, and there's your target name. So it makes things very quick. All right, so I will well, actually a couple questions. Will this new feature, does this eliminate the session mode? No. So sessions are 100% active. So we're just tweaking the look and feel of the learning tree. So this will be replacing your old view of your learning tree. There's no beta. We're going to prep you guys with articles and videos, but this will replace your current look and feel, but the buttons will be the same. And sessions will, of course, still be there. Sessions are not going away. And then let's see, one more question here.
I got those last two.
Oh, you got them. Okay, perfect. Yep. Awesome. So that's it, guys. So thank you so much. I'm going to change this into a nice recording. Those of you that are registered obviously are on here. You'll be getting a notice, I believe. If not, it'll go out in a Learn Alert or the Chronicle, and it'll also shortly be in our help and in our YouTube page. So thank you guys so much. We'll be on the lookout for more. We're going to do a revamp, Learning Tree revamp webinar in the near future. And thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.